Greetings, everyone. My name's Dr. Peter Hughes, and I'm looking forward to working with you today as we learn and play with AI. This presentation is specifically for paraprofessionals and aides that support students with learning disabilities, but I think that it's also generalized enough that most educators would find it helpful. So without further ado, let's talk about the training and what we're going to be doing today. First of all, let me tell you that these presentation slides are available at this link. You can either scan the QR code with your iPhone or other Android device, and there's the link there with a short URL that will take you to these slides. You're welcome to revisit them at any time. Our agenda today is as follows. We're going to start with a general introduction to AI, its history, and where it's kind of causing us to evolve. Then we're going to be using prompts with ChatGPT to give you some basics about a very significant tool that's used largely in education. There are many tools out there right now, but we're going to start with ChatGPT just to demonstrate how AI can be used. We're also going to talk about three other categories: how AI is a tool for equity, how AI is a tool for teaching and planning, and how AI can be used to foster critical thinking in students, not just a workaround for doing the work, but a tool to actually think deeper about the learning. And that's really where we want it to go. So we're going to have a great day. It's going to be hands-on. There's a lot of opportunity inside of this to stop and play, which I think is important. You learn best when you're actually experimenting. So a piece of today is going to be giving you the time to really do that. So without further ado, let's get started. First, I think it's important to understand that on November 30th, 2022, the world changed. The world changed because ChatGPT released the first public tool for anybody to use experimenting with AI. Prior to that, it really was in development and the tools weren't available. But immediately after, a lot of educators saw the potential of this instrument, but they also saw the downfalls of and some things we have to watch out for. We're going to talk about those at the end of the presentation. But in general, this created kind of an understanding of how education might change. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an analogy right now from my own experience. When I was 11, I won't forget, I was in fifth grade. I'm very old, I understand, but it is what it is. We had a computer teacher, and it was very, very avant-garde to have a computer teacher back then. And we only had one computer that she wheeled in on a cart. And I'll never forget it because it was an instrument and a tool that we had never seen before and never used. And in that year, fifth grade, we were learning MS-DOS and basic logo. Like, we didn't know what we didn't know at the time because the tool was so brand new. Fast forward to the internet and when the internet evolved. What happened was the first internet was HTML, and it was a language that you had to understand in order to get the visuals and the information to come across a web browser. And really only people who were computer programmers could make that happen. So you had a very limited number of people that could put things on the internet. And it was one-way communication from the programmers to the people using the information. But then once social media started to come out and the tools became easier and easier to use, we started to connect internationally through the computers. And what you saw was everyone wound up having a voice, and it was person to person. Well, now what's happening is the newer tools are actually mimicking human intelligence through machines. And what we now have is kind of a new evolution of the internet and these tools, and it is machine to human interactions in a way that we never had before. So when you look at the evolutions of technology, we are really at a cutting edge right now. We're just at the beginning, though. And whenever this happens, you have three choices. When, for example, Google came out for the first time, Teachers had the thought, well, we can ban its use and pretend it doesn't exist. We could try to block it and not allow kids to use computers and web browsers, or they can accept and adapt. And I use that analogy because we are currently in the very same spot that existed when Google was released. Because administrators and school districts had to decide which of these three pathways to take. Now, it sounds crazy because of where we are now, but imagine a school that didn't allow kids to use the internet. Well, I think similarly, the AI tools are going to be tools that become so integrated into the learning that they're impossible to avoid. And I think that that's already happening. So this gives you a little bit of a pretense as to why this is so important and why what you're about to experience and work with is cutting edge. So in the next section, we're going to start using that tool right away. So in just a moment, I'm going to give you time to set up an account in ChatGPT and start playing. I wanted to show you first kind of an example of what it looks like when you get there. You're presented with a very simplistic screen once you log in. You will have to create an account. I'll go over those instructions in just a moment. But once you're at this screen, it will ask you, what can I help you with? And for this first one, I just want you to be creative and think about things in your life that this might be helpful with. For example, I'm going to be taking a trip to Portugal in a couple of months, and I was wondering if it could help me with an itinerary. So, for example, I'm going to be spending 3 days in the island of Madeira, and I'm going to ask it very specifically to create an itinerary for me over 3 days. So I'm just going to type into the prompt. I plan on going to Madeira, Portugal for 3 days. Please create a 3-day itinerary for me to follow and see all of the most important sites. And when I hit return, it's going to quickly start generating. And what it's doing is it's already been trained with everything on the internet, but it's historical. So it's not going to be anything really recent. For example, if there was a fire that happened on the island recently and destroyed a site, it would not be represented. But let's see what it does. So it's actually creating the response, and it gave me not only pictures, but also the response. Here's a 3-day itinerary for your trip to Madeira. Day 1 in Funchal. You can see that this happened immediately. It really took no time at all for it to do this. And it offered me even 2 different responses. That may be because I'm using a more premium version. But this is an example of something that you can do now. Let me show you specifically how to access this site, though. So for the next 10 minutes, I'd like you to get started with ChatGPT. You're going to visit chat.openai.com. You're going to need to create a Google account or create an account with another email. And then just you basically confirm the account, and then you're able to go in. Explore the interface and start experimenting with prompts. One thing that I would say, though, is make sure you watch for privacy concerns. You don't want to use like your own really revealing information, because it does have access to data that you put into it. So take about 10 minutes, explore how you see the tool working, and then we're going to come back and work with actual things that are educationally focused. I'm sure you had an amazing time with that. The first time I used ChatGPT, I was just playing for hours, so I wouldn't be surprised if you come back to this. But now I'd like to shift more towards the work side of things. We're going to talk a little bit about how this tool can be used, both to support your students that you're working with, as well as the teachers you work with as well. So we're going to focus specifically on how do we use it as a tool to help with teaching. The first thing that I want you to do is think of one of the struggles of one of your students. And I just want you to do kind of this, jot it down on a piece of paper. What's the disability that gets in the way of the learning or the child's success? You know, some kids may have a hard time writing and using logic. Some kids may have a hard time because they're struggling socially. Some kids may have a hard time because they have a different type of disability like dyscalculia. So these types of things get in the way of their learning. Think about the students you work with and come up with an example. And I also want you to think of, now that you know what the issue is, what if you had a tool that could problem solve with you? How could you use it? Thinking back to the disability or the challenge that the student has, what are some things that you would love to have as a coach to better meet the needs of that student? And then what if that tool helped modify lessons to better meet the student where they are? So ChatGPT and a lot of these AI tools are actually, experts that can help you rethink of how do we best meet the needs of children. And I think that this is an example where if you take a moment just to do this and then go back into ChatGPT and start asking questions about your learner, that can be really positive. But again, I'm going to go back to the idea of privacy. You want to make sure that you're not using names or specific information about the child, because ChatGPT does own anything you enter into it. So make sure that you have that confidentiality mindset. But in general, you can describe in great detail some of the struggles you've had as an aide or a paraprofessional. So take a few minutes now and just use the information that you just thought about to kind of problem solve and use it as a mentor to you. Now that you've had practice with using ChatGPT as a coach and, talking to ChatGPT as recommendations for ways to make learning better for the student you work with, I wanted to give you some examples of basic prompts that you might want to use to better connect with students. The first one is writing a fictional story about an interest that your student has. Maybe your kid is really interested in space, and you could create a story very simply inside of ChatGPT that is about exploring Mars, for example, or going to Mars. You can also have ChatGPT write the story with your student's name as the protagonist. Very cool stuff that can basically merge and personalize things in literacy to what your students are really interested in. The second example is really showing the power of it as well, translating text into a different language. So sometimes a lot of our students come from different countries where English is their second language, and they're ELL learners, they're English language learners that may be struggling to connect to the things in class. So it's not just special ed disabilities, but it also can sometimes coincide with language challenges. Also, sometimes things like Shakespeare might get in the way of a high schooler understanding and be able to access the story. But you can actually have ChatGPT translate Shakespearean text into something that is more along the lines of what your student can handle and understand. So this is a way of differentiating. The third example is creating a list of emotive words to include in a high school argumentative letter about offshore drilling. So based on the assignment, you can use ChatGPT to better give tools to your students about how they can improve their writing or access material. So I'm going to do a demo right now to show you how this works and how simple this is. So let's get started. So here I am at the prompt again, and I'm going to start with something that the teacher asked me to create. Teachers are very busy people. They may or may not be familiar with ChatGPT, so you can help them out in this way. In this case, the teacher's asking for a sample text that's going to exemplify how to hook the reader and get them involved. And she gave you very specific ideas about what she's expecting. So in this case, I'm just going to put in a prompt that I created that's very long, but it's going to give you an example of something that's much more complex that you can use ChatGPT for. What can I help you with? I'm helping a 6th grade language arts teacher. Could you please help me create a mentor text for middle school students that illustrates how to write a compelling narrative essay? The essay should include the following features. And then the teacher had some things that they asked for in this. And then finally, after talking about the features that you want included, the narrative should be about a student who overcomes their fear of public speaking. The tone should be engaging and relatable to students aged 11 to 14. Please ensure the mentor text is approximately 500 words long and uses vocabulary that is accessible to this age group. So all of those extra directions can be put into the actual prompt. And unlike searching for something in Google, it only pulls up things that have already been created. ChatGPT will go and create the item, the prompt, and it will be 100% unique based on what it's designed from. Now, it's pulling from all of these different sources on the internet. It may not be the most original text that you see, but let's see how it does. So I'm just going to hit return and we can watch it go to writing. Have you ever felt your heart race as you stood in front of a crowd, your hands shaking and your voice barely a whisper? That was me just a few months ago. I used to believe that speaking in front of people was a nightmare I could never escape. But then one day, everything changed. ChatGPT just wrote this sequence, this sample text, and it did exactly what I asked for. It made it in the appropriate age range, the appropriate information. Very cool stuff. Now, before I was talking about translation, I can now say, translate the above to Korean. And what will happen is it actually knows exactly what was written above. It remembers the last prompt, and now it translates the entire story into Korean. So when you look at this tool, it's a tool that's going to be able to provide access to a variety of students. Now, change the English version to be appropriate for 7-year-olds. It can modify the original story to be even lower age range, and it basically gives you various alternatives when you're trying to meet the needs of your unique child. So this can be a really powerful tool, one that we should be using. Now let's talk about how we should be using it with our students. So far, we've used it ourselves as a tool for teaching. Now let's talk about how we can use it to better get students to use critical thinking and to become more advanced in its use. The first thing I want to say is that this tool can really be a tool of equality and equity. So equality means everyone has an equal access to learning. Equity means you give every kid what they need when they need it. So teaching these types of tools to our students is really about teaching them for the future. If we don't teach them how to use these tools, we're not preparing them to be competitive in a world of tomorrow. So my question that I often ask is, are we preparing all of our students for the world of tomorrow or yesterday? My focus is always on preparing them for the tools that will exist and how they function in the future. So the idea of having students use these tools is an important one, but I'm going to reference you to please check with your policies in your district as to how they want students or don't want students using AI, because that will to a certain degree, dictate how you can use these tools with students. But
Okay, I
in
need you to hold on
general,
tight 'cause I have a very
I wanted
serious
to
question about the
take a
use of AI.
moment and introduce a bigger question that people struggle with when we talk about student use of AI. Is this ethical? I want you to watch this creator. She's an English teacher, Gibson. I'm a huge fan of hers. She does a wonderful job contextualizing kind of the challenges that exist with AI. So let's watch this video real quick.
Okay, I need you to hold on tight because I have a very serious question about the use of AI in education, and I seriously need your opinions about the way I just used it. I have an amazing senior student who is definitely dealing with some sort of writing issue. For whatever reason, their incredibly good brain does not do a good job of getting all those great thoughts that they can verbally give me on paper or computer. There is some sort of a processing issue at play, but it has never been diagnosed. So this kid is coming into their senior year. They have plans of going to college, but when they write, they literally cannot see the mistakes they are making, and their writing is frequently feeling like nonsense. But when I talk to them, I can tell, like, they can explain to me what they were trying to write, and it's totally solid. It's absolutely intelligent and insightful. So I took a paragraph of their writing and I put it into ChatGPT, and I simply asked ChatGPT to rewrite it. It took this kid's paper from non-intelligible to about a B level paper, and it did that simply by trying to figure out which words this person meant. And what it did, what it gave me, was essentially what the student had told me. It was like an interpreter. I see this as a really acceptable way for students to use something like ChatGPT. But if they go to college and they have professors who say absolutely no AI, and if we detect it at all, you're screwed, then this incredibly insightful student is going to miss out on a college education because she has a writing processing disability of some sort in there, which probably should have been caught a long time ago, but here we are. So do you think that that's an acceptable use of AI? Because I feel like it's as legitimate as it gets. It was the student's original thought. It was the student's original writing. It was just AI helping them actually say the words that they were trying to say. And I know some of you are going to be like, well, that student needs to learn how to write better. That student has been trying to write better for many years because this has been their lived experience. However, there becomes a point in time where you need to go to college or you want to continue your life, and it's going to take you years to try and figure out what's going on with whatever your processing issue is. And I want them to be able to go to college now. Thoughts? Thank you all for doing the good work.
I love her perspective on this. She started using AI like immediately with her English class, and she's bringing her students through kind of how do you use it as a tool, but she's also using it as an accessibility tool for her kids in this case. So you're going to see a variety of responses to AI and student use of AI, but I think that this really comes back to a key problem, and that is, are we preparing kids for the world of tomorrow or the world of yesterday? And if this tool can help mitigate a disability and help accentuate the child's strengths, that should be where we are, right? So I am going to give you some recommendations as to how you can use it ethically. I think that when kids use these tools, we should be honest about it. We should teach students to cite AI with prompts and dates. For example, if I'm using it to rewrite a story, I should be able to write that to my teacher. I used AI to help develop my first paragraph and develop my thesis. This is what I originally started with. This is what it gave me. You can add disclaimers, because earlier I wrote a story or had something translated into Korean. I have no idea if that Korean is perfect or not perfect. By saying translated with ChatGPT, I'm basically taking the onus of whether or not it was correct and just just giving credit to ChatGPT as being the thing that translated. It wasn't Peter Hughes that did it. Also, adding descriptions of how the AI was used and for what purposes, I think is really helpful. It helps kids be metacognitive about how they're using these tools in their learning. And then finally, model your expectations for students. If you're using AI, say it. If you're using AI to modify or create a story, do it for the kids publicly so that they start to see how adults are using these tools. I think that all of these things are really valid. I do want to shift a little bit, and I want to give you a real quick question, true or false. There are programs that will show if students are using AI in their answers. I want you to just do this mentally for a moment. True or false? Do you think that there are programs that show students are using AI? The answer is false. There are companies that will say that they're doing this, but oftentimes there will be a lot of false positives, which means it will say that it's AI and it's not actually AI. And there's also false negatives where it says it's not AI, but it actually is AI. Each time AI does this, this writing, it does it at a certain grade level, and it does it in such a way that it is unique. So if you took a look and you plugged in some of the ideas from our story earlier into Google and looked for a story that was exactly the same, you would not find it. It created an original text. So I think that for the near future, we don't have a way of indicating whether or not kids are accurately using this tool all the time. Therefore, it's better to teach them how to use it responsibly and truthfully. Also, it's changing the way we're teaching and having kids write more in class, and limiting how they use these tools in the schools. So it's just something to keep in mind. It would be very hard to make a 100% statement that this kid is cheating because they're using AI. That's not real. That's not real right now. There will be a lot of falsehoods in that. But I do think that it also gives teachers a lot of time back for helping with planning. And as aides and paraprofessionals, it will give you the opportunity to take the tools that the teachers are creating and bring it to your specific child. If you know that your child cannot read high school Shakespearean language, you can still translate high school Shakespearean language into something that is more accessible to them and will be more legible for them. And then finally, I wanted to talk a lot about AI as a tool for critical thinking and not work avoidance, because I've shown you examples where the work is being generated 100% by the computer, but it's really important that we take a look at this next slide. This is probably the most important slide from today. It talks about the levels of AI use for students. I was introduced to this through a professional development program I went through, but I love this because it really lets us conceptualize how we can use this tool and get it to get kids to think more deeply about things. So step one, or stage one, would be when we ask the tool to do all of the work for us, create the essay. In this case, really no human energy is being provided. So kids will use the tool to circumvent homework. It's basically, do my essay for me. I don't care. Let's get it done. The ownership is really low, though. You'll be able to spot when students do this because you'll know that the writing is completely out of the kid's perspective. It didn't come from their brain. Let's not give kids simple tasks because they're going to use the tool to just circumvent the learning. That's step one. Stage two is really where the student gives a little bit more information, a little bit more background. In a situation like this, maybe they created an outline of what they want in the essay, but then they ask the tool to create that essay for them using the outline that they provided. In this case, the student had to do the outline, but really is not that invested in the final product. So that's also not the best thing. Of course, we can use the tools to help, design and give us ideas, but ultimately we want to make sure that they're using creativity and designing their own products. Stage three, this is where I really want us to use these tools a little bit more, is using AI to assess student work and give feedback. So as teachers, paraprofessionals, and aides, you can actually upload student samples and have those samples analyzed for areas where things can be improved upon. And this is a great example of a first draft being done by a student. Before the teacher reviews the first draft, the student can be asked to put it into ChatGPT and any corrections made and ask for any areas where their writing can be improved. So this is almost becoming part of the writing process. I think that would be a great place to be in kind of stage three. Now, stage four is really the higher level. It's going from assessment to help me learn more. I created this essay. I think it's great. What are the next steps to bring my writing to the next level? And asking the tool to give you even deeper feedback creates a cyclical cycle. So as an aide, paraprofessional, or teacher, if we can get away from the ones and the twos and towards the 3 and 4, where kids are using the feedback to actually improve what they're doing, that would be wonderful. However, it's a lot of energy, and kids will sometimes try to circumvent the hard work of learning. They have to practice and build their brain muscle. Our brains are a use it or lose it organ. So it's really important that we're pushing them to use these digital tools, not to circumvent work, but to get to a higher level of learning with the tools. That's the goal. So please use this tool to analyze your own practice and helping teachers and students, and try to get the students to use the 3 and the 4 levels of the spectrum of AI. That's the goal here. Okay. And now, as we near the final chapter of today's training, you've had an opportunity to see the tools and how they work. You've seen some examples of how you can use it as both a paraprofessional or aide, as well as how you can use it with students to make their own works better. Now it's important to talk a little bit about the larger awareness around AI, so that you have a deeper understanding and kind of a literacy around it. So one thing that I would remind you is that learning is always better when it's social. So, as much as we can use these tools to augment the learning, really we should also be using our relationships with our students, because that's highly motivating. Teachers are not going anywhere. Paraprofessionals are not going anywhere. It's not going to ever be that kids learn from just the computer sitting in front of them. Learning is social. We should try to emphasize that. And finally, there are some downsides to this technology that it's worth talking about. This tech is so new. There are some real challenges that wind up coming about. And one thing that I would say is the tech is motivated to give you answers, whether or not they're the truth. So I'm going to give you some examples of things I've done in the past. I've asked AI to cite sources or make sure that it gives me credible sources in its writing. It will make them up. It will say Jones et al. 1990, and that's not actually a real citation. So it's not always true. So be skeptical. Teach our kids to be skeptical. Always go back to district policy questions and know that the AI itself has bias based on how it was trained. I'm going to give you an example. One of the first things I asked ChatGPT is what its thoughts were about AI in education. And it gave me a beautiful answer, but it was so positive that it didn't talk about any of the negatives that exist. It didn't talk about the fact that sometimes it will make things up. So I think it's really important that we talk to our kids about citing sources and making sure that they're double checking the source materials. Also, although AI will appear to be human in the way it interacts with us, it's not. It's really important to remember that all that the computer is doing is making associations between words. It's not actually thinking, and it's not actually at that level. And then finally, like all technology, it can be used for evil as well as good. So there's examples where AI is becoming a model for crime. For example, there you can sometimes get a phone call as if it's a loved one. They've used the voice of the loved one to mimic that person as if they're in trouble, like your son got in a car accident. It's important that you realize that with this technology, it's becoming much better at scamming people. So just be on the lookout for that as well. So finally, we will have to adapt and be ready, but we also have to be vigilant and mindful of how the technology is used. And nothing will change the fact that it's here. It's not going to be helpful to ignore it. We have to learn how to integrate it in a way that's positive for kids. Finally, you're not alone. Make sure you reach out if you have questions. Make sure that you're talking to your colleagues and your fellow teachers, and you're having this dialogue professionally with your administrators. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I really appreciate your time today. I know you had a choice of workshops to attend, and thank you for choosing mine to attend.